to the September 16th meeting of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll? Here. 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 Welcome, everyone. We have a single item on the council calendar this afternoon, and I'll have Carla read it in a moment. Just want to welcome you all here. Just basic ground rules for those of you that may not be frequent visitors here. If you're here to testify on this item, you just need only give Carla your name and she'll put you on the list. And likewise, when you testify, we typically allow 3 minutes for individual testimony. It doesn't look like there's so many people here that will be a problem. You, again, need only give us your name, no need for addresses and such, unless you're a registered lobbyist, in which case you need to disclose who you are here on behalf of. We maintain the rules of decorum in this room, so if you agree with someone and feel compelled that you want to show it, feel free to give them a wave of the hand or thumbs up, and likewise, if you disagree with someone and want to show it, a polite hand gesture to the negative is fine, but we don't make vocal demonstrations in favor or against our fellow citizens' points of view in this room so that the council gets to hear all of them. That's about all there is to it, so Carla, would you please read the item?
Item 966. Adopt regulations for marijuana license procedures and requirements.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor Harrells, and welcome everybody. Last year, Oregonians and over 70% of Portlanders voted to legalize recreational marijuana. So it's now the city's turn to put a framework in place to regulate and license the sale and distribution of marijuana within our city limits. And of course, we have previously been strong supporters of medical marijuana, and that those dispensaries have been operating for some time. I'm very pleased to now be in charge of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, which is in the capable staff who've been managing this project. So I want to start by thanking Claire Adamsick and Tom Bizot on my staff, and also Teresa Marchetti, Victor Salinas, Amy Archer, and Amalia Alacon-Demars, and pretty much the rest of the entire Bureau who've been working on this for several months, and thank you for all of your good work. The Office of Neighborhood Involvement staff are in a good position to balance industry interests and small business opportunities with livability concerns that go hand in hand with regulating a vice like liquor and now marijuana. And so I'm going to invite the staff to come up to the table, please. We're going to hear from our staff for about 30 minutes. Colleagues, I'd ask you to hold your questions until the end because it's a fairly extensive presentation, and I believe you'll get many of your questions answered. At the end, I have a few minor amendments to propose, and copies of those are available with the council clerk as well as have been distributed to you. Then we'll have a while for time for council questions. We have an invited panel, and then we'll open it up for testimony and come back with more discussion at the end.
Thank you. Teresa, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Teresa Marchetti. I'm the Livability Programs Manager for the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, overseeing the marijuana policy program, or the development of the marijuana policy program. Thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed framework for the regulatory licensing and requirement for recreational marijuana businesses and medical dispensaries within the city of Portland. As you know, this council approved the development of the marijuana policy program within the Livability Center of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement in November of 2014. For those of you who have not been following it as closely, I'd like to provide a little bit of legislative background. So in 2014, the legislature passed Senate Bill 1531, which legalized the sale of medical marijuana from marijuana dispensaries. At that point, recreational marijuana and the use of it was still illegal. In November of 2014, Measure 91 was passed by the voters, which legalized the personal use and growing of marijuana and also provided a framework for regulating the sale and distribution of marijuana that was largely modeled after the Liquor Control Act. In 2015 legislative session, House Bill 3400 was passed. This effectively modified Measure 91 and Senate Bill 1531 in a couple of ways that are important for our conversation today. First of all, it requires a land use compatibility statement from the local government before a state issues a recreational license. It also allows local governments the option of opting out of housing one or more of the license types. It allows local governments to regulate the business operations, often called the time, place, and manner, of retailers, wholesalers, producers, processors, and also medical dispensaries. It also allows local governments to entertain the idea of a 3% recreational or a 3% tax on recreational marijuana with a referral to the voters. And finally, it allows local governments to create a 1,000-foot buffer between recreational retail locations in order to address and reduce the possibility of saturation. In addition to that, the legislature also passed Senate Bill 460. We're in an arena right now where actually the recreational system will not be up and running until January of 2016. So the legislature passed sort of a stopgap that would allow the sale of limited recreational marijuana from existing medical dispensaries beginning in October 1st of 2015, which is coming very quickly. That will be tax-free until December 31st of 2015. And then through 2016, it will be taxed at 25%, sunsetting December 31st of 2016. I'd also like, just for your information and for context for our discussion, to reference the federal landscape of marijuana. It currently is still illegal federally, but there was a set of guidelines that was released from the district attorney that is lovingly referred to as the Cole Memo that outlined several priorities for prosecution, for federal prosecution. And those also provided some guidance for jurisdictions that were looking to legalize marijuana within the states.
I think you said district attorney, I think you meant attorney general? So
Thank you,
at the-
sir.
at the federal,
Attorney,
okay.
yes, thank you. So some of those include preventing revenue from the sale of marijuana from going to criminal enterprises, preventing diversion of marijuana from states that had legalized to states that have not legalized or just across state lines in general. Preventing the authorized marijuana activity in states to be being used as a pretext to cover other illegal activity, preventing violence in the cultivation of marijuana, and also preventing youth access. So to give you an idea about what the landscape of marijuana looks like in Portland specifically, we currently have 132 medical dispensaries that are registered with the state. 120 are operating. We do know that there are current compliance issues with some of those locations. Some of them are not adhering to some of the state regulations. We also know that Portland houses about 40% of the retail alcohol market, so we assume that marijuana will be located here in similar numbers. We also are in a landscape where local jurisdictions can opt out of licensing. And we've had, as of drafting this, there were about 25 local jurisdictions that have prohibited licensing within their boundaries. So primarily Southern Oregon, and it's unclear what jurisdictions within the metro area will be efforting that.
Teresa, can you just give us a quick flavor of what some of those current compliance issues are, just categories, or do you do that later?
I can now.
Just a thumbnail sketch.
Sure. They're currently within the OHA's parameters. There is a 1,000-foot buffer between dispensaries. Some dispensaries are not in compliance with that. Some dispensaries are operating without being registered at all, so completely unlicensed. So the framework that we are proposing today goes to address a number of different elements. We think that Portland has a clear interest in regulating the marijuana industry as it integrates into our commercial corridors. First of all, to encourage the responsible integration of the industry, but also at the same time addressing those environmental impacts that could potentially have adverse effects on livability or public safety. We're also concerned about the security of the industry itself. And as well, we think that this is an excellent opportunity to really establish what the community expectations are going to be around this issue. There's a wide variety of opinions, and the Office of Neighborhood Involvement is in a unique position to be able to mediate those. In addition, we have also provided some recourse for Portland communities to address the unlicensed locations. Currently, the Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission have no statutory authority to address anything but their licensees or registrants. So really what we want to do here is create a roadmap for success. We know, this is what you're seeing, this graphic, this bell curve of behavior is a well-established concept within the social sciences. There's always going to be about 10% of actors that act outside the law, within the gray areas, within the loopholes, and that's going to require some level of enforcement. There's also the 10% of good actors that, regardless of the rules, are going to go above and beyond to meet the community expectations and to run safe and livable businesses. It's that 80% in between that falls can be motivated by rules and community standards, as long as they understand what those are. And we hope that this is the beginning of that discussion. So to illuminate more on what the nuts and bolts are of the regulation that we are proposing, I'd like to introduce Victor Salinas. He's our marijuana policy program coordinator.
Good afternoon, and again, my name is Victor Salinas, for the record, and I am the Marijuana Policy Program Coordinator for the City of Portland. I'd like to take the opportunity to share the proposed marijuana regulatory license requirements, which would be for medical dispensaries, those who sell marijuana and marijuana items through the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act, or patient card holders and caregivers over 21. This also includes licensing of marijuana retailers who sell marijuana and marijuana items to general public over 21. In addition, we'll be offering licenses for marijuana processors who are focused on the production of marijuana items, including edibles and concentrates, and as well as marijuana wholesalers who transfer marijuana from producers and processors to the retailers. And of course, licensing marijuana producers who are in charge of growing or cultivating marijuana. It is worth noting that the city is not regulating growers and producers currently under the medical marijuana system, since that is out of our scope of authority and covered under federal law or on patient protection with HIPAA. I'd like to move on to discuss a little bit of the proposed minimum standards to process a license application. This is an initial evaluation criteria that also serves as the criteria for the land use compatibility statement that will be processing as part of the state license, and it will be working and will be part of the concurrent process running with the city's proposed license. So this initial criteria includes ensuring that proposed businesses are within a fixed location, so no mobile or satellite locations would be allowed. In addition, based on language from House Bill 3400, businesses would not be able to site within less than 1,000 feet from schools.
Victor, this, without getting too technical, how do you calculate 1,000 feet? Is it?
That would be as the crow flies.
Just to note, council and those watching, everything that's in blue is in state law. So those are things that are mandatory that we are not allowed to change. Other parts of our proposal that are not in blue are things that we can discuss as to whether we want to do it or not.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. The next component of the minimum standards would be that marijuana business retailers be at least 1,000 feet from another marijuana business retailer, and that was through the authority granted to the city by our home rule and by through language in House Bill 3400, as well as a minimum distancing of 1,000 feet between medical dispensaries, and that is per Senate Bill 1530. In addition to that, we also have another component which includes language on zoning, and that ensures that businesses do not zone within residential zoning RF through RH, and that is per state statute prohibiting licenses to zone in areas that are exclusively zoned for residential use. And again, just to clarify, this would be the criteria that we also use to go through the evaluation process for the land use compatibility statement. In terms of the proposed application procedure for marijuana regulatory licenses, all applicants must submit City of Portland forms developed by the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. They have to need to present a business license, where applicable, a change of use permit, proof of an alarm permit, a lease showing authorization for use of the property owner, and the application fee. For those applying for a producer or processor license, they will need to show all appropriate permits are being obtained or have been obtained. And in order to proactively address safety concerns and nuisance activity, we are including a component that we have identified as a marijuana control plan to address security. And this would be for retailers and for medical dispensaries. That the plan would include language on how the businesses plan to address security measures, minor access or restricting minor access, how they plan to address trash in the surrounding areas of in and around the business, and another safety component commonly known as SEPTED, or the crime prevention through environmental design, to minimize any safety concerns or to address safety concerns and minimize nuisance activity.
Victor, does the requirement that the applicant submit a lease showing authorization, is that for the specific use of a marijuana dispensary, or can it be just for any commercial use?
That would be for the specific use of a marijuana dispensary or a marijuana business retail or retail business. I'd like to follow with some of the proposed notification process that we've identified through our public involvement process to help mitigate community concerns and serve as a bridge between the industry and community as we integrate this new industry into the Portland business community. That component includes that all applicants, as we go through the application process, the director shall provide a notice of application before a final decision is made to the Police Bureau, the Bureau of Fire and Rescue, the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services, and the Bureau of Development Services.
The next slide, please. Oh,
Thank you. For medical dispensaries and for marijuana retailers, we've also included the component to help address and mitigate community and industry relationship, that property owners and property occupants within 300 feet of the proposed licensed premise be notified by mail. And the other component that is incorporated is that district coalition offices and neighborhood associations in which the marijuana regulatory licensee is located or proposed to be located, that they will be receiving a notice in the mail, notifying them about the name of the property, contact information, as well as how they can obtain the marijuana control plan that addresses the safety and livability concerns.
Commissioner Fritz, on the question of notice to coalition offices and neighborhood association, is there any reason why we don't expand that to include a business association if it falls within one of the 50 districts?
actually, Commissioner, I was just about to add my piece of this and say that we're going to be directing the district coalition to be notifying the business association. Of course, there isn't necessarily going to be one in all areas, but where there is, the administrative direction to the district coalition will be to make sure that the business association will be noticed. Of course, adjacent businesses will get the written notice.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And lastly, the other form of notification will be a posting of a public notice where the marijuana regulatory license is located or proposed to be located. So once we go through the process, the evaluation process for the licenses, upon a presentation of a state approval and payment of the licensing fee, then the City of Portland would issue the license if all components are met satisfactorily to establish a location within the Portland city limits. At this time, I'd like to move on to share on our public involvement process, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all the representatives from identity and culturally specific groups, as well as the industry that participated and helped shape the policy that we are proposing before you today. We did this through engagement through a town hall series that involved 3 town halls in Southwest Portland, in East Portland, and in North Portland to ensure that we were reaching the broader community. We had approximately 100 participants throughout the 3 town halls and addressed many concerns that we'll be sharing with you shortly. As part of the involvement process, we also convened a community stakeholder work group that met over a period of 11 weeks. And we had approximately 5 meetings. No, I'm sorry, we did have 5 meetings. And we addressed a series of concerns that both from the industry side and the community side, addressing livability and safety concerns. We also did targeted outreach to approximately 635 contacts to inform of the development of these policies and how we were advancing in the process. And we did this through social media, through Nextdoor, through Facebook, through Twitter, as well as phone calls, emails, and in-person communications. And we feel that the regulatory system that we're presenting before you today is reflective of the collaborative effort through this public involvement process and the input that we received. In terms of some of the feedback that we heard, the main themes were to avoid preferential treatment for existing medical dispensaries opting into soft start sales through regulations by October 1st, 2015. Another point raised was to work with the state to ensure that the soft start does not encourage the illegal market, ensuring that the marijuana control plan does not unreasonably affect business operations, address social environments, including smoking lounges and events responsible for consumption, which is something that we plan to do as part of our next steps as we reconvene the stakeholder work group. And that we use an equity lens to create opportunity for small growers, emerging business owners, and communities of color to access the market, as well as women-owned businesses. In addition, we plan to address another point raised continuously, which was to address education about marijuana addiction and prevention awareness, and to address components that would ensure that we limit saturation of adult businesses like bars, marijuana retailers, and lottery establishments in the city. We also heard concerns to support legal businesses and go after the bad actors, because as we know from other enforcement programs that we have, that the program is only as good as its enforcement. And of course, reminding our community members here that the reason why this program has been we were asked to house it in the Office of Neighborhood Involvement is because of the fact that our programs are people-centered and we focus on a collaborative enforcement process. We were also asked to address funding for the marijuana policy program, which, just to clarify and further iterate, that this is a cost recovery-based program, not a fee or not a revenue-creating program. And we were also asked to address police enforcement and their response to complaints. So in terms of the licensing requirements for the proposed marijuana regulatory license, all licensees will need to display their city license. They need to ensure that no consumption takes place on the premises.
Victor, or Commissioner, I just was curious about the no consumption on premises. You go to a bar, order a drink, you can consume on premises. If you go to a cigar bar, buy a regulated product and consume it on the premises. The no consumption on premises, the rationale for that in this context is?
Teresa can chip in, but I believe it's because the state law that was passed by the voters says no consumption in public. And so a business is a public place.
Public accommodation.
Yeah.
So it was fine.
And we are, as Victor mentioned, we did hear during the town halls and through our outreach that there is some interest in looking at, could there be places to do that? It's a bigger question than we wanted to tackle under this program right now. So,
Of course, one significant difference is if you go into a bar and someone else drinks, you don't consume alcohol. There's a slight difference in the secondary impact of someone else's conduct. But anyway, our current law, you believe the current law does not allow for on-premises consumption because of the
Yes.
no use in a public place.
Thank you for the clarification. So another component that we include is ensuring that businesses have a security system with surveillance, and the city of Portland is also addressing delivery services, so no delivery service unless specifically provided by state law under the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act by caregivers. For all marijuana retailers and medical dispensaries, they must have someone designated at the entrance to check IDs. The hours of operation must be no earlier than 7 a.m. and no later than 7 p.m.
9 p.m.
I'm sorry, no earlier than 7 a.m. and no later than 9 p.m. and must not set up mobile or satellite locations. So this would include, farmers market stands, other stands, mobile carts, and so on. So they must be within the fixed location for which the license was authorized or granted. In terms of the licensee requirements for the proposed marijuana regulatory license, all marijuana producer and wholesale licensees may not be open to the general public. And we did hear a concern in terms of potentially as they expand the social environments to allow for tours or media entering these businesses. That would not be considered under what is defined as general public. So they also must install a filtration system for the building ventilation to address odor impacts to the community and surrounding areas. And all marijuana processor licensees must not be open to the general public and must adhere to state and local food regulations for food preparation. So I'll turn it over to Teresa to speak on the application process.
Thank you, Victor. So as we envision it currently, and through process mapping and talking with both OHA, which is the Oregon Health Authority, and the OLCC, the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, we have developed what we think will be the process for applying for a city license and and we've sort of detailed how it will interact with the state's process as well. On this slide, this is the application process for recreational marijuana businesses.
Sorry, but you probably don't want to use the infinity symbol for a regulatory process again.
For the licensing process.
Start and an end.
Start and end. There is an end. So
I carried away
initially,
graphically there, Teresa.
maybe I did. There is, so to start applying for the city license, there will be, the applicant will submit their forms, and the minimum standards will be assessed by the city of Portland. At that same time, we envision that the application for a state license, that process can run concurrently. The state will request a land use compatibility statement from the city of Portland, which will cross over those minimum standards. Essentially, it's the same criteria that we would use to provide them with a LUX, an approval or denial. And if OLCC ultimately approves that application, then the city would issue that license. The application process for a medical dispensary is slightly more complicated in that medical dispensaries currently exist. So under the existing medical dispensaries, which we intend to begin licensing pending approval by City Council as of October 1st, follow the blue trajectory on this graphic. So basically, they would apply for a city license. The city of Portland would verify that they actually have a valid registration with the Oregon Health Authority and that they are in good standing there. Then would assess the minimum standards at that point, ensuring that we catch any of those compliance issues, of which I talked about a little bit before, and then the city license would be issued. After that period in which we are licensing the existing medical dispensaries that open after October 1st of 2015 would follow a slightly different trajectory in that they'd be applying for a city license. Those minimum standards would be assessed, that 1,000 foot from each other from a school. Then we would be verifying, that feedback loop would happen with the Oregon Health Authority, where we'd be verifying a valid registration, and then the city license would be issued. I wanted to talk a little bit about the enforcement mechanism for this program as outlined in the proposed requirements and regulations. They may be subject up to $5,000 for $5,000 in penalties for administrative violations. That could be either for operating without a valid city license or operating in violation of a requirement of this chapter. We do have an ask for code enforcement staff that we will be further detailing in the fall bump, but it is requested as part of this presentation. That would allow for two-person teams to address compliance issues, basically north and south of Burnside.
Teresa, is the penalty component of this, is it a ladder where the first
Yes, sir.
time it's something and then it cumulatively and at some point gets to 5,000?
Yes, absolutely. And we intend to reconvene the community work group to look at the regulations and define what will be essentially a Class D violation that would come with a much smaller potential penalty than for instance, operating without a license, which we would elevate to a higher level.
Is the general philosophy, though, sort of first violation is corrective,
Yes,
multiple violations becomes a pattern, and therefore you use the hammer?
absolutely. That's sort of the trajectory that all our livability programs follow. So it starts small, usually with a warning, with education. We envision that happening with first and second violations, and then after that, assessing civil penalties as the behavior becomes more prolific and consistent. So
What do you need two-person teams for? Why not one-person team? Or one person, I guess.
we want to ensure that that there is a partnership there that it's really for safety purposes, so that if our staff is approaching these businesses, particularly the ones that are operating without a license, that they're doing so in partnership with another member of staff.
I mean, wouldn't you use police as a backup in that situation, or?
To get into that, into
So-
the amendments,
Yes, we will.
there's been some reluctance from the police. So that's part of the reason why we're proposing that the staffing be in ONI for the majority of the inspections and enforcement.
And does OLCC use two-person teams?
Yes, typically, at least with liquor, they're still currently hiring their enforcement staff for their marijuana program. And typically, I mean, this program is based on administrative requirements and administrative violations. And so I think that the reluctance on the part of the police bureau to designate resources for the enforcement of an administrative program is sort of similar to, for instance, the enforcement of our noise control program, which is also heavily administrative. Obviously, we would have some partnership with them, or at least we would hope to have partnership with them if it crossed over into the arena of criminal activity.
Commissioner Fritz, if all else fails, you can lobby Dan and say that the Fire Bureau proposed two-person teams.
Not be a bad idea.
Four-person teams, yeah.
And just to be absolutely clear, no criminal citations or enforcement will be conducted by this office, although we will have partnership with police if there are situations that arise that need their expertise. District Attorney Rod Underhill has also confirmed that his office will address violations related to minor access and public consumption also outside of the purview of this particular program. At least in terms of enforcement, we will be engaging with the community on elements of education to that extent in a more informal capacity.
Is he seeking funding from us or the county or some other source?
I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you on that.
We haven't had that, I haven't had that discussion with him. I was actually just at the Girl Scout luncheon. He and I had an ongoing conversation about this. The question had arisen, if police were to cite somebody for use in public, would the district attorney prosecute? And the answer is absolutely yes.
But presumably, he will seek some funding source to cover that overhead.
Well, presumably when they prosecute, there's fines and such involved that we may or may not get.
So moving on to the fee structure, again, this council had asked when they approved the development of the marijuana policy program that it be developed in such a way that was cost recovery, and the fees reflect that. It's obviously difficult to project the number of applications, but we've been in conversations with Denver, Colorado, and with Washington, and specifically Seattle, Washington, on the distribution of their licensing and what they've seen. Denver, Colorado had over 900 licenses locate within their boundaries within the first year. Washington has a statewide cap that was recently increased, but for their 334 static locations statewide, they received 7,000 applications within the 30 days that they allotted for it. There's a lot of interest, just right over our northern border, so we expect a lot of interest here in Portland as well, who is welcoming to the industry. So this assumes, obviously, medical dispensaries, we do have some information that there's about 132 that are operating. We assume the same amount for marijuana retailers. Obviously, there's a natural cap that's provided by the 1,000-foot buffer that we've proposed. Marijuana processors, producers, wholesalers, we've tried to roughly ballpark that number based on what we've seen in other jurisdictions, but in truth, we're not completely sure how many to expect. So the cost of administering the marijuana program includes the 3 positions approved by council previously, the livability programs manager, our marijuana policy program coordinator, Victor, and also our marijuana policy program assistant, who we hope to be hiring very quickly here. It also has an additional ask, again, for 4 policy code enforcement officers and then a OSS2 support specialist. This includes basically all program costs, materials, rent, all of that.
So the intent is it would be revenue neutral, cost recovery, and that we will come in the full bump to ask for position authority.
Thank you, Commissioner. So in terms of next steps, this is actually one component of this one small-ish component of the overall marijuana policy program. As all livability programs, we look at what the regulatory framework is, what our needs are within our communities, and we try to respond to those through education, and as well as further work with policy, which, especially in this arena, we will be needing that. So we intend to move forward with an educational program with our partners in other jurisdictions, with the county, and also with our schools in particular, to address youth access, youth education. We will also be involved and ready to disseminate information related to DUII. We're also going to be embarking on an education program for the industry to make sure that they understand what the procedures are for application. We hope to partner with both the Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission on that, so that we're removing barriers as much as possible. We also will have the local tax option at 3% discussion that will need to happen, that council will need to have in the next coming months. And we will also...
Just to be clear on that issue, we're not deciding that today. The choices will be we enact a 3% tax, we send as 3% tax to the voters, we try for our 10% tax that we passed before the ballot measure passed, or we don't tax at all. Those will be the 4 choices, but that's not on the table today because we're not allowed to do any of those right now. Except nothing.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we will also be convening the community work group. They've done excellent work, and we're hoping that all members return to the table to begin this discussion around responsible social environments. We heard from a number of members that are concerned, where do I go if I want to consume responsibly, but I don't want to be around my children? Valid points, and something that I think garners greater discussion. Currently, the state licensing entity is not intending to license any on-site consumption. Commissioner Fish, which is what you are referring to when a bar is licensed for the sale of on-site consumption of alcohol. We're also in communications with individuals who want to do events strictly related to marijuana. There have been a number who have been extremely proactive, come in to speak to us about the do's and don'ts, best practices, those kinds of things. There's a number who have not. So we'll begin those discussions about how to ensure that those events happen in a responsible way. And also, this is obviously the first go-around for this proposal, and it was the first go-around for the state as well within their legislative session, and I imagine that there's going to be some more work to be done in the legislature in the coming one and proceeding ones after that. Commissioner, would you like to speak to the amendments?
Yes, colleagues, I handed out some amendments. This has been a continuing work in progress, and I don't anticipate that what we adopt today, hopefully, or next week, would be the final version. But yesterday, we realized there were a couple of Scrivener's errors, and minor ones. There's a memo dated 9/15 that we handed out yesterday, and that's a scrivener's error on section 14 in Exhibit A. Section B, 130.020M is a duplicate definition and is deleted, which then reorders the other numbers in that, letters in that section. And then in section 14B, 130.080C2, instead of just saying Multnomah County, we need to say licensee must adhere to applicable state and local regulations. There are more than Multnomah County regulations. So that's my first amendment move.
Do you want to move them as a package or individually?
I'd recommend as a package.
Okay.
Take it apart if we have to.
That's the first one. The second one is in a memo dated today. And the auditor very helpfully brought to our attention that the changes that we adopted on appeals to the code hearings officer changed the amount of money and the regulations for appeals of the director's decisions on marijuana license approvals. And so we're proposing to change 14B 130 120 to add review by the director and appeals to the code hearings officer, and then adding to 14B 130.070F that the director shall give the applicant written notice of the denial in accordance with the minimum requirements of Chapter 3, 130 of Portland City Code. I apologize to everybody listening. I know this is all administrative gobbledygook. It really is administrative gobbledygook. The intent is to make sure that we're not charging an excessive amount for an administrative appeal. And so the net result is a good thing for the community. And then we're also adding that same section to 14B 130 100B1. I'm required to say all this to get it into the record. I apologize. Then in section 14B 130 110B, the director is in accordance with the minimum requirements of Chapter 130 of Chapter 3 130 of Portland City Code. That's also added to 110C, and then this kind of explains it better. In section 14B 130 120, we had review by the director and appeals to the code hearings officer. Any determination issued pursuant to sections 14B 130 070, 100, or 110 believed to be made in error may be reviewed by the director if requested by the recipient. The request must be submitted in writing within 15 days of the determination and must include all evidence that supports the request. The director's determination shall be served by regular mail. The director's determination may be then appealed to the code hearings officer as provided by Chapter 2210 of the City Code. And that then changes the numbering on that. And then for the fee schedule, instead of the code hearing appeals fee of $1,750, the administrative review fee is $250. And then there's also a minor change to the section 090 to instead of actually this one's a little different. This one is about police assistance, which is what Commissioner Saltzman was asking about. So I'll take a breath. That was the previous ones on the administrative fee. Then for Police Bureau protocol, we wanted to make sure in partnership with the police that it's clear what the police are and are not going to do in helping us with inspections. So section 14B 130.090D3 will now say, police assistance in issuing an inspection warrant on an unoccupied property, including inspection warrants pursuant to 14B 130.090, the judge may authorize any peace officer as defined in Oregon Revised Statutes to enter the described property to ensure the safety of the director or the representative of the Bureau in completing the inspection. So that removes language that allowed the police to remove any personal obstacle and assist in inspecting the property in any way necessary. And so it's more in conformance with what the actual police do in other situations where there's suspected criminal activity. Then finally, the last amendment corrects the fee schedule to have the administrative review fee be $250 instead of $1,750.
So is there a second to those amendments, and then we can adopt these if that's the council's decision, and then conduct the hearing and take testimony, and if folks disagree with any of these amendments, as well as whatever in the package as a whole, you can let us know.
And there are paper copies for anybody who felt as inspired by that whole recitation of gobbledygook to want to actually read it.
And Mayor, just to be clear, by adopting them, we put them on the table for public comment.
Correct. And Captain Kruger's here from the Police Bureau. I think this ameliorates the Police Bureau's concern, but we can get confirmation about that. Or if there are any questions about the Police Bureau's role, he can answer them. But other questions before we vote on accepting the amendments for public testimony? Roll call, please.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. Okay. Anything else from Victor, you, and Teresa before we go
Feedback or
forward?
questions?
Just wanted to know if council has further questions for the staff.
Great PowerPoint.
Yeah, I don't have any further
Nicely done.
questions. Dan?
Hey.
Steve, anyone have further questions before we?
We do have an invited panel,
Okay.
and then we can get to public testimony. Thank you, team.
Thank you very much.
Folks should also know that online, we have the proposed code, again, with the things that are in state law in blue so that it's really clear. And I want to thank the person who made that suggestion at the last town hall. I think that's really helped me understand where things are.
Okay, and your invited panel is here.
You know who they
Come
are.
on up. Good afternoon, welcome.
Thank you.
Who'd like to start?
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you. My name is Laquita Lanford, and I was a part of the Community Stockholder Work Group, and very thankful to have been a part of those conversations as a community member, and feeling included in the conversation. I had spoke out before to a couple people that encouraged me to continue to want to do the work that I'm doing with organizing with people of color in the community to have those discussions about inclusiveness and in the business. That was the concern for me, safety and business practices and how those were going to be looking for people of color. And this is a new opportunity for our city and people that have been marginalized and that have not been included in the past but have been criminalized for for marijuana. So taking a new approach with what we have in our city as rec is to, for me, it was just doing more of the outreach and just learning more and being able to connect and be an advocate for the community of color and rallying folks around to have some know your rights sort of trainings. And I got some pretty good responses and like a lot of concern. So there's still work to do on that in that area. But as far as the community works stock group, it was very positive and I learned a lot and I was able to just be a part of that conversation and be in that city and different events throughout throughout Portland. So I'm still looking forward to, connecting with the folks in the group and with the city and making sure that the community is connected. Not just saying going to a website, but just giving them the information step by step for those who are wanting to be involved. So I thank you guys for the opportunity today to be here to speak on that.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, for the opportunity to testify. My name is Amy Margolis. I'm an attorney with Emerge Law Group. We focus primarily on the cannabis industry. I'm also the director of the Oregon Cannabis Association. I was part of this group from an industry perspective and from a sort of boots on the ground legal perspective. We represent many, many people in this industry. I want to thank Mr. Salinas for allowing us to participate. I've participated in a lot of these, and this was the first one where it wasn't just law enforcement, industry, legislators. It really reached out to the community in a kind of special and unique way. So I'm very appreciative of that, and I think people felt very included in that process. There were a number of good pieces of this legislation. There were a number of pieces of this legislation that promote this industry, that keep communities safe, that focus on public safety, and I'm very proud of the work we did on those pieces. I do have a primary concern, and I need to explain, I think, what is happening right now for you to understand the impact a small portion of this legislation would have. And I think you're going to hear from other members of the community who are here about this issue. So the rules divide licensing into two groups for dispensaries, medical and recreational. Currently, medical dispensaries, and you saw from your PowerPoint, need to be 1,000 feet from each other. And they will, come October 1, start selling adult use flower. They will be applying for medical licenses under the Portland licensing regime. So they will hold those licenses. Many of those medically licensed dispensaries intend to get recreational licenses. They have been operating, they have been up and running, they are compliant, we heard the phrase bad actors. These are the good actors who are participating and in good standing now. What has happened, and Victor reminded me that I objected to this during the meetings too, what this legislation does in creating 1,000 feet from each other within the medical program and within the recreational program, but not allowing a period of opt-in, not allowing those medical dispensaries to have first crack at the recreational Portland licenses. What you are doing is creating a situation, and it's a confusing issue, and I'm happy to talk it through, but what you are doing is creating a situation where existing medical dispensaries that have existing medical Portland licenses will not be allowed or able to become recreational dispensaries because a brand new recreational dispensary may get the City of Portland license first.
Because of the proximity?
Because of and I'm going to call it a false proximity designation. I just made that up right now. But I think it's appropriate. And that's because the statute doesn't have that requirement. And the I participate in the Licensing, Compliance, and Regulatory Committee for OLCC, and they are not imposing that. So this is unique to City of Portland. Other jurisdictions are doing other things. I'm also on the Clackamas Task Force. However, I have yet to see something that will pit medical dispensaries who are creating business plans. So a number of these dispensaries are expanding their square footage and putting additional registers in. They are actively seeking investment to expand to accommodate early recreational sales, and then to hear come October, when recreational dispensaries are licensed, that these medical dispensaries who have created whole business models around transitioning will not be able to transition to recreational is, I think, an unintended and an unfortunate consequence.
So you believe this is unintentional?
I do not. So we spoke about this. I apologize, Commissioner. I think that the City of Portland did not intend to create internal industry competition and to push out existing good actors. That's what I think is unintentional.
You know the problem we were trying to solve.
I do.
Yeah.
And so there are a number of suggestions and ways to solve that problem without directly and negatively impacting existing and operating medical dispensaries. You want the good players to stay. You want the people with internal and institutional knowledge to continue to participate in this
Here,
program.
Commissioner, because she represents an industry, can we extend the
Yeah, no, I
compliment?
want to keep going. This is a useful
I
discussion.
think there's others who want to address this issue, and it was discussed at the task force.
But, fair enough, but again, because of her unique position in this, could we take an extra minute just to hear her proposal for what the fixes
so-
could be, just so we have those in front of us?
That'd be useful. So how would you recommend we solve the problem of too many licensees in a small area? We've experienced that before with liquor licensees. We know what it looks like, and it's not pretty. So what would you recommend?
So, Mayor, Commissioners, thank you.
By the way, you don't have to call us mayor and commissioners. They do that in Salem, and it like gets in the way of all the testimony. You can dispense with that, and we don't even need your address.
It's a good thing I don't wear my suit jacket either. So the easiest solution, if you're trying to, and I don't speak for, and the other industry members maybe have an alternative solution, but I think if the goal is to address there being too much saturation, and I understand that is the goal, then the easiest way to solve that is just to have all locations, medical and recreational, need to be from 1,000 feet from each other. That would solve this problem completely. So if all licensed dispensaries, medical or recreational, were required to be 1,000 feet from each other, you would not have this issue.
Clear enough, thank you.
Sounds elegant.
Who's next? We'll ponder that while we listen to Linda. And we'll also listen to Linda.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor Hales and city council members, first time. Thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is Linda Nedekoven, and I am a community member of the Marijuana Work Group, and I'm representing only myself in speaking here today. I also would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the excellent work of ONI staff. This is an incredible maze of information that they have helped to lead us through, and members of the group have also helped each other in terms of understanding what's going on. It's really been a great learning experience, as others have said, but I think it's, in a sense, priceless for what we're trying to accomplish here in Portland with these new regulations. I'm in support of the proposal before you, and I'd like to take my time to just emphasize what I think are a few of the necessary next steps. In addition to the education and outreach efforts that were just mentioned, there's also the information form and the marijuana control plan, all of which I think could benefit from review by stakeholders. I'm glad you caught the omission of business districts. I was also going to mention that. And I think, again, training for coalitions, neighborhood coalition staffs, opportunities for neighborhood associations to begin to help to understand the implications of these new regulations would be really helpful in just terms of answering questions and being able to be resources for the community at large. I'm hoping the crime prevention staff isn't spread so thinly that they can't occasionally step up on this one as well. I think one of my big concerns is the land rush, in a sense, that we're facing, and having enough resources to be able to answer all the questions, handle the applications, deal with community. And I guess the key effort here will be to manage community expectations, both in terms of how long licensing processing will have to take and how long, education and other sorts of things will take to unfold. I think it's important that the information form and the marijuana control plan, we can see how many things there are to make sure are included, that we include the relevant information, and we don't develop things that are onerous for new applicants to be able to understand and navigate. Second, was planning to chime in on the issue of saturation. I, of course, have no solution to offer, but I think I know there is fear out in the community that adding the marijuana dispensing establishments along with places that already have what might be called too many bars and perhaps in some cases adult entertainment venues is going to, in a sense, preclude the opportunity for those neighborhoods to become walkable because their business districts will lose some of that valuable real estate that could be devoted to the goods and services that people need for daily life. So I'm hoping that there are some good ways to deal with this issue of how many and located where. Third and finally, and you may think I'm contradicting myself here, I think the city really needs to explore the development of regulated private premises for consumption of marijuana. By coincidence, the luncheon speaker yesterday at the TREC Transportation Summit was Eric Kleinenberg, the author of Going Solo, who talks about the dramatic shift in our population and the numbers of people that are now living alone in our society. And that a piece of that, obviously it's very important in terms of future transportation, land use, other kind of planning decisions we make. But the fact that so many people live alone means that many people then choose their connectivity by being outside in private spaces, public spaces, third spaces. That's their way to come together and connect with people. They're not doing it in their homes alone necessarily. So again, the idea of the social enterprise that's involved with consuming marijuana is something that we really need to address. It was on the list, but I just want to emphasize the importance of that conversation going forward. Again, I don't have answers, but I think it's really important to be considered. So I'll stop at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Dr. Jennifer Vines. I'm a health officer with the Multnomah County Health Department. I'm a family physician by training, and I'm also board certified in preventive medicine and public health. Thank you for the opportunity to provide support for the City of Portland ordinance that facilitates the introduction of retail marijuana businesses. We at the county have been carefully tracking changes to state law related to both recreational and medical marijuana. And we know that this is new territory for elected officials and other government agencies. So like you, we are quickly learning and adjusting to this changing landscape. I'd like to just identify for you the 4 areas of concern to public health that we're tracking most closely. The first is that highly potent marijuana, either smoked or consumed, can easily lead to overdose. And we know that since retail sales began in 2014, Colorado's Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Center has received over 70% more calls related to marijuana exposure than it did in 2013. We know that youth are particularly at risk for accidental poisonings when marijuana products are not stored safely or out of reach. The second is that marijuana slows reaction times and doubles the risk of traffic accidents. When drivers are under the influence of both marijuana and alcohol, impairment is compounded. The third issue is that marijuana use by pregnant and breastfeeding mothers is of great concern. So avoiding any chemical exposures like marijuana is really a priority for healthy fetus and infant development. And finally, fourth and related to our concern for pregnant and breastfeeding mothers is around youth access, and this has to do with the developing brain. So we know that, well, our understanding of the effects of marijuana on the developing brain are still evolving, but we're taking the precautionary principle here, and we're assuming that those effects are unlikely to be good. We do have strong evidence that marijuana users who start at a young age have an increased risk for becoming dependent. So keeping all of that in mind, as we look at the proposed ordinance to address time, place, and manner of operation of marijuana businesses, we expect the ordinance to be helpful in addressing these concerns. Based on what we know from a large body of alcohol and retail outlet research, limiting the density of marijuana retail outlets is prudent. Studies have consistently shown that high alcohol retailer density is associated with increases in alcohol misuse, unintentional injuries, and crime. The density limit not only improves neighborhood livability, but it may also discourage impulsive purchases and the negative consequences that result, such as overdose and auto crashes. The limitation on hours of sales also should help limit the consequences of impulsive purchases on fatal auto accidents, which occur most often on weekend nights. Finally, ordinance requirements to assure age verification upon business entry and at retail sale is a fundamental part of limiting youth access and of setting the norm that marijuana use is an adult activity. The county is also actively engaged with the Oregon Health Authority and Oregon Liquor Control Commission in public policy development around other common sense rules about potency, packaging, testing, and pesticide use. We urge you to also monitor and provide input on these issues that are outside of the city's authority. So in closing, we'd like to thank the City of Portland for its diligence in developing this ordinance. We appreciate your efforts to hold town hall meetings and gather community input. The ordinance presented today not only incorporates community feedback, but also maintains structure around time, place, and manner that supports our vision in public health. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions for anyone on this panel? Thank you all very much. Do you have other invited testimony, Commissioners? We'll turn to the sign-up sheet. Okay, Carla, let's please turn to the sign-up sheet.
I have 13 people signed up. The first 3, please, coming up are Joe Petrie, Anthony Johnson, and Donald Morse. And they'll be followed by Philip Chen, Mike Rochland, and Samuel Groves.
Welcome, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Petrie. I'm the author of King of the Fall, Life is in the Drug Wars, and the 15-ounce pound. Big Farmers Plan, the patent pot. When the Dispensary Act came through last time, one of my friends lost his license. Somebody moved in within 1,000 feet, and he had worked at that spot for 2 years to make it a business. The man is here too. And somehow, we got beat to the punch. It had to be nanoseconds for him to get the license after we've worked there for 2 years. We couldn't figure out how he could have done it. Well, now we have. They have a program that get their applications in before anybody else's. They got a supercomputer system, super money, backing these out-of-town people who want to make rules that benefit them, that put people like that have been here working for 10 and 12 years out of business. This man right here has been here for 6 years. He runs the Human Collective. He sells cannabis to patients cheaper than anybody. He works at such a profit margin that I don't know how he makes money. And he's going to lose his business. Even before you guys get to the next step, this is already rigged. They have it rigged. And her applications, their applications right here, and they've already tried this program. Their applications will get in before anybody else's. They've already tried it during the Dispensary Act, and they're going to do it this time big time. I suggest that you're not grandfathering these people in that have paid their dues here on the state, but at the same time, make it equal for everybody to get their application in and make sure that they're residents of the state. Make sure that they're not from Colorado or from some other state coming here to make laws that benefit indoor growers when we grow the best cannabis in the world and it's grown outdoors. You're going to create a big friction here between the medical people, the outdoor growers. We're going to bury these people. But we're not going to take them fixing the game. We're not going to take it. And that's what they've done. They got away with it at the Dispensary Act. They're not going to get away with it this time. I'm begging you now, you need to really take a close look at who you're dealing with. You know, I went to Lewis and Clark to a talk like this, and I was first on the list. I was surprised. I got put to the rear because they didn't want me to come and be able to speak to you like I'm speaking to you today. But just like it happened to my friend at Leroy at Hallelujah Farms. And by the way, these people that moved in within 1,000 square feet, they were out of business in 90 days because one, they didn't know how to grow pot. Two, they didn't know how to run a dispensary. Three, they hadn't done their marketing. They didn't have their following. They didn't have their business. These people have businesses, customers that have been set up for a long, long time.
Thank you.
You made that very, very clear. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for listening to me here. My name is Donald Morse. I'm the director of the Oregon Cannabis Business Council. We're a trade organization for the industry, and I also own the Human Collective Dispensary here in Portland. Ms. Margolis laid out the problems here with this plan as we read it. Someone can go across the street from any dispensary in town and rent a location, not make any improvements to it, and then file the application. And if they're just nanoseconds ahead of us, they get it. And the dispensary that's been a part of the community, built up as business, employs any number of people, et cetera, will be forced out of business. Now, you may say, well, they can remain a medical facility. Well, the OLCC and the OHA are on record, both publicly and privately, as saying that within 2 years they expect that the two systems will merge. Market forces are going to make this happen. The dispensary owners in my organization, all of them plan to go retail. And the reason is they know that if they don't, it spells the end of their business within a couple of years. So really what you're doing is you're setting up a dynamic that can punish the people who paved the way for the industry in this state. And I think that is gross injustice.
Thank you.
So how will medical patients get their medication if everybody goes to retail?
Medical patients, for instance, in mine, medical patients can come in and buy in a retail establishment. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. However, there is the tax. In this coming short session, we are going to be pushing a bill that will basically state that medical patients with a card cannot be taxed regardless of what type of facility they go into. So that'll take care of that problem. We expect that to pass because we have a tremendous amount of support for it. Secondly, in my dispensary, even after I become retail, the OLCC is allowing us to give uniform discounts. So I could discount 15% off of the price of any product that's listed at retail for anyone with a card, and that's exactly what we anticipate doing. So we built our businesses on the medical patients. We have no wish to turn our back on them. We're going to protect them every step of the way. But this is going to become a one-channel industry within a few years. And basically, like I said, these dynamics will punish the people who have helped to set the industry up as it is now, and it's just not fair.
I'm very glad to hear that you're looking out for the patients. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yes, my name is Anthony Johnson. I was co-author and chief petitioner of Measure 91. I am the executive director and registered lobbyist with New Approach Oregon, the PAC responsible for Measure 91, and the Vote Yes on 91 campaign. Today, I'd like to first briefly just touch upon the fact that we do need to have social use lounges or places for people to use cannabis in this city. Under state law, marijuana needs to be out of public view and cannot be used in a public place. But that doesn't discount private clubs and private establishments similar to cigar bars, for instance. Most pressing to the rules and regulations before us today, as Don and Amy, others have touched upon, is the 1,000-foot barrier. And in Measure 91, when we wrote the measure, we did not have any 1,000-foot barrier in the measure. And that 1,000-foot, and over 56% of Oregonians, 70% of Portlanders voted for that measure without the 1,000-foot barrier. And we were aware of the 1,000-foot barrier that exists for medical marijuana dispensaries, and there are plenty of good actors that have been good partners, good neighbors, serving patients admirably within the medical marijuana community. But also that 1,000-foot barrier also cut out people who could also be good neighbors and do good work. And just because you get your application in 1 second earlier or a minute earlier than somebody else doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the better representative for the industry. And so we would argue that marijuana should be treated like bars, breweries, and wineries. And we follow in the footsteps of our microbrew and local winery industries and not have a 1,000-foot barrier. And the saturation issue will, I was going to say weed itself out, but the saturation issue will correct itself in that the cream will rise to the top and those actors will survive and the bad actors will fade away. If we operated our microbrewery industry like we did, like we're proposing to do with marijuana, you could imagine a time where the McMillan brothers or Deschutes or somebody would be not allowed to enter the industry because somebody got their application in 1 second before them. So I would argue, and we would argue, to not have that 1,000-foot barrier, allow the competition and allow the cream to rise to the top, and that's a better policy for Portland and the rest of the state.
Well, let me be clear about this from my standpoint. I think this is probably pretty shared among us. My interest in any kind of a 1,000-foot or any other buffer approach is not at all founded on a desire to create a system that people could game or a system in which we're trying to pick winners and losers among business people. But what it comes from is unhappy experience in this city with what is known as Lottery Row on Hayden Island, with a very close proximity of establishments that are both licensed liquor dispensers and lottery dispensers, both ironically licensed by state government. It's created a very odious situation for the people that live near that. And having been once burned, we're now a little shy. And so we're looking for ways to make sure we don't replicate that problem there or in other neighborhoods. So that's why I asked Ms. Margolis, understand the problem we're trying to solve. The problem we're not trying to solve is figure out who we like better and make sure they succeed. Not at all. That's not what's going on here. But we do have a responsibility for neighborhood livability, and we've seen it eroded in that instance by the proliferation of state-licensed restricted substance distributors and state-licensed gambling operations too close together and causing all kinds of side effects that's hurt the livability of the neighborhood. So understand that's the problem we're trying to solve. I think I speak for the whole council in articulating that. So this discussion is very helpful because maybe we don't have it right yet, but understand where we're trying to go.
May I offer
Please,
up one
yeah.
more solution then? just to allow, say, a 2-day period when you begin accepting licenses in which to allow existing businesses to make their decision and submit their application. After that, it's an open field for whoever wants to enter, as long as they're outside our buffer zone or whatever. And that way you get to limit the number and you get to protect the industry that's brought us this far.
Okay, that's great. Good, thank you.
And if I could just chime in, I do think, I guess grandfathered in, if you will, existing medical marijuana dispensaries is a better policy than allowing the existing medical marijuana dispensaries to be blocked out of the upcoming adult use system. But I still think a better policy is to make sure we bring in qualified people. And I think that a more comprehensive approach that maybe looks at the different neighborhoods in the city. Some neighborhoods may be okay with the larger proliferation of marijuana dispensaries, while others may not. It may not be as suitable for those locations. But just to think that people existing today are necessarily better than people who would come into the market isn't exactly the case. I do think it's a better policy than allowing somebody to swoop in and take their 1,000-foot barrier. But I think that a more comprehensive approach would be a better approach, and that we have time to consider these issues out as the state's not going to be accepting applications until January 4th, and that a decision like this that does have a big impact upon who gets to participate in this industry, as well as who really is still targeted by the drug war, the war on marijuana, because they're not able to participate in this industry, I think is an important issue for us to consider.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Take the next three.
Are Philip Chen, Mike Rockland, and Samuel Gross. And they'll be followed by Lindsay Reinhardt, Sarah Duff, and William Frederick Mario.
Welcome. Would like to be first, Mr. Chen? Go ahead.
I'd like to echo some of the points that
Just give us your name again for the
Philip
record.
Chen, owner of Puddletown Organics. It's a medical marijuana dispensary. I want to start by saying that the compassion for patients is how this industry in the state was built. That being said, we face a saturation in Portland specifically. And I know in my case, and I speak for many of my colleagues here who are also dispensary owners, that if recreational shops open in between us, then some of us are just 1,000 feet away from each other already. If a shop opens up in between me and my nearest neighbor, now we have 3 shops within 1,000 feet of each other, and it makes the neighborhood unlivable. So we already have the operating experience. We've already invested. And I think that with increased competition, you'll see more places go out of business, and that would lead to more vacancies and would affect the macroeconomics of Portland severely when people have to give up their lease. So the people that are already in place, I think, should have at least a first shot at receiving recreational licenses.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Mike Rockland, and I'm a patient advocate, public health nurse, and I'm interested in what you've done. I think I've attended a lot of legislative events down in Salem initially and OLCC meetings, and have seen the state really perform well, and I think the city's doing a commendable job with outreach to the communities, probably better than any other city in the state that I'm aware of. So I think that's goodness. And after following what I heard from Amy Margolis in terms of the idea that we might be headed into, like, the other words that we use are like land grab, I've seen that already this last year. It's been driving real estate prices crazy. So there's a natural tendency, people hear that this is a green rush, like a gold rush, and they're wanting to get some money. So I think that's what's driving some of this. The newness of it and the concerns I have to do with the medical patients that have already been established, dispensary owners that have done very credible work and been involved in this whole process as we've gone along, lend to the experience of being able to be fair and good players in this industry. So the other point I'd like to make is that this 1,000-foot rule, I hadn't heard that explanation before, and that's really good to understand. And I think that we're at a point now to set something great and maybe amend it later would be a good idea. The idea on allowing medical dispensaries that exist now that have a business license, I think, is really good and important. for the community. Because as I also heard and have experienced, neighbors, communities concerned when a sign pops up, a posting, that's a lot of fear for the neighbors. I've been involved in community groups, and that certainly is a concern. So look forward to a fair and transparent process as this appears to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name's Samuel Gross. I'm an attorney here in Portland. I also serve on the OLCC's Licensing and Enforcement Rules Advisory Committee. A lot of the sentiments that I feel have already been echoed today by some of my colleagues here, Amy Margolis, Anthony Johnson. One of the things that I want to point out, and I don't want to repeat some of the points that have already been made today, but what the industry seems to be asking for is that they get first crack at obtaining a retail license for adult use marijuana. This sets up an interesting problem for them because currently, under the proposed OLCC regulations, a particular physical location could only be issued an OLCC license or a license under the OHA, and that those two licenses cannot coexist in the same space. So therefore, if a business wanted to apply for the recreational side, as soon as that license was issued, they would have to then give up their OHA license.
For medical, you mean?
For medical, correct. And so therefore, they would have to choose immediately upon that application. So this could set up some interesting issues because they would give up the health license, the OHA license, and then that would free up a space on the map potentially for another medical dispensary to move in next door to them. So the other thing I want to look at this 1,000-foot rule is we're worried about oversaturation, and we're treating the city as a homogeneous fabric, which we know it's not. We have some areas that are higher density in population and other areas that are not. If you look at Southwest Portland and the Pearl District and the core here, we have a higher density of population, and therefore it might make sense to allow more dispensaries to exist or more retail outlets to exist in that space. When you take into account the exclusion zones for schools that are already in place, you only have room for a discrete number of businesses to operate in the downtown core here, which may actually need to support more dispensaries. And then you can look at other areas of the city which aren't as densely populated, that 1,000-foot exclusion may be even to allow businesses to pack in too closely. So I think that Measure 91 said the city may regulate in a reasonable time, place, manner, and that treating the city as homogeneous with 1,000-foot among all businesses just may not be reasonable in this case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much. Questions? Thanks. Next ones.
Next three are Lindsay Reinhardt, Sarah Duff, and William Frederick Mario, and they'll be followed by Jeff Sugarman, Mike McGrath, and Bo Whitney.
Welcome. Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lindsay Reinhardt. I'm here today to talk about a couple of things that I found in the ordinance. On page 1, number 8, there is concern about the saturation. I wanted to refer you to the Colorado and Sacramento land use studies that show that areas that have cannabis dispensaries are higher in security and safer for the environment, as we are required to have extreme security measures in place. I work at One Draw 2 dispensary in Portland. We have had officers come into our facility and ask us for our security footage because there was crimes that were committed right by us, and we were able to help them with those cases. So
I appreciate your testimony. You're going to get your full time, but I would welcome your view on what's the downside of a rule that just says 1,000 feet between dispensaries, regardless of whether they're medical or recreational. I'd just be interested in your view as to why that would be bad.
Well, it's detrimental to some of the facilities. The one that I work at, we're a medical facility, and then right next door, we also have a glass store where we would like to serve recreational cannabis. We share a wall with that. The owners own the entire building. So we have a medical facility on one side. We'd like to have a recreational on the other, where we can go ahead and utilize both licenses in one location. But they're two separate locations because they're two separate addresses. They are very much within a foot of each other.
And alternatively, if we did adopt the narrower view of the 1,000-foot rule, you'd have to go find another space four blocks away or 4.5 blocks away.
Correct, and they already own the one that's adequate to serve both populations. So asking them to have an additional expense when they already have the necessary space and security is a little bit outlandish, in my opinion.
Again, Mayor's going to give you all your time, but let me just ask you something. Do you feel that, is there an equity argument here? I mean, did your owner take actions anticipating that the laws would be a certain way?
They
or
have.
did they take their chances?
No, we have design plans and they want to knock out a wall and see if they could have a dual license, which doesn't exist yet. And so now I came here to find out if they should knock out a wall or not. You know, should there be a dual license, or should they have a recreational and a medical side by side? Is that even going to be allowed? You know, because that buffer zone, we absolutely have other dispensaries that are almost exactly 1,000 feet away from us on the plus side of the law. So they are over 1,000 feet, and we do weed each other out. We've watched that dispensary that's 1,000 feet from us fail twice now. And it's because there's good actors and there's bad actors.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So the other one thing I wanted to address on there is that there's already a lot of cannabis processors and producers active in Portland that aren't going to be able to wait for an OLCC license in order to obtain their Portland license. And I felt that the language on page 9 was a little bit directionless on that. It just kind of seemed like a big loop. On page 6, there is the order in which it's received to the director of the application. We'd like to know if that is processed or if it's payment received, and if it's going to be an online process, because again, with the internet concerns about people hitting enter before they're able. On page 9, letter B, it says that they can be registered or licensed. Registering a business with the state of Oregon is very easy. It doesn't cost very much money, and you can do it online. Licensing is an entirely different issue. It takes us months to get licenses from OHA, so making that language be more clear, saying that they have to be licensed, would be appreciated. On page number 11, number 2, it says that there's no on-site consumption allowed. The state law says that if you're a patient in an enclosed, locked room, that you are allowed to use your medicine on-site at the facility. It is not to be, shared. It is not to be blatant. It is to be able to safely and properly use your medication. I would ask that you please go with the state law there. I have multiple sclerosis. I'm off 22 pills. I don't care to take any, and I would like my medicine to be acceptable to use at work, please.
Give us a real-world example of how that works. What are we
Sure,
talking about?
absolutely. I sit in a very cold room all day processing paperwork, and I have muscle spasms. So if I close that door and I lock it, there's no windows, I'm not in public view, and I can use my medical cannabis, and then my muscle spasms stop.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So we really do need to have that. And then as far as consumption goes on site, as far as the lounges go, you have 3 lounges that I know of operating in the city of Portland. Those are safe havens for people that have PTSD, people that have chronic pain, people who are going through cancer. People are able to go network at those lounges and meet other people that can help them through those experiences. And it's absolutely incredibly necessary to our community to be able to support one another. So when you guys do go ahead and do lounges, I would ask that you please consider those very carefully, because they're very important to those that use them. And lounges and events. The events, we had a really interesting trouble with the High Times Cup. So we need to be able to have a place where we can hold cups and be able to have people medicate properly or recreate properly, and still be able to leave safely and in an orderly fashion without the OLC stepping in and saying you can't do that. So we need to be able to have a place that we can hold our events at. And the last thing I had was on breastfeeding and pregnant mothers. There are several studies from Jamaica that say that cannabis is safe for nursing when pregnant women, and I'd also urge you to look at those.
Thanks very much. Very helpful. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Duff. I've been a cannabis activist for 13 years in Missouri, but in Portland for the last 10 years, and I live in Portland. I'm here to talk about just my view of trying to have a low cost of barrier to enter the industry, and it does seem like with the license fees that they are relatively high compared to many other industries' license fees. The medical cannabis dispensaries, it looks like you all are proposing $1,750 for your license fee, and the state fee, I believe, will end up being $4,500 by the end of it. But when the voters voted, they voted for a $1,250 fee for recreational licenses, and at the time, we already knew that it was $4,000 for a state fee for the medical dispensary. And so now, under the proposed rules, if we have to have licenses for the city and the state, it looks like it would end up being $6,250 for the city and state fee for medical dispensaries and $7,500 for recreational retail licenses. So if you wanted to do both of those, that looks like about $10,500 per year, and that seems like a lot of money. It also looks like there would be double enforcement, enforcement on the state level as well as on the city level. It doesn't really seem like we need to have double enforcement. I think just one is enough. I also wanted to reiterate something that Lindsay was saying, that we do need to have lounges and events and the ability to use marijuana. Let's see, one way that we should be arguing that marijuana is similar to alcohol, we all like using it together. It's a very communal drug. If you want to call it a drug, it's a non-toxic herbal remedy to a lot of people. I think that we need a champion on this issue. We don't have that on the state level. If we should have that anywhere, it should be Portland. So I'm going to be pushing for allowing that on the state level, and hopefully we'll be able to craft better regulations here in Portland, since we do have the most support. Also, in other industries like the furniture industry, they like to have various furniture stores in the same area. And I think that marijuana could be very similar to that. This may be one issue where marijuana and alcohol are not exactly the same. It may be possible that lottery and alcohol may not exist the best way if you have multiple competition right across the street from each other. That may be a little bit different than marijuana. I'll cite for an example, there's, let's see, basically 39th and Hawthorne, or Cesar Chavez. So you have, let's see, there's two different smoke shops directly across from each other, and then there's one just a half block away. So there's three within one block. And they don't seem to be arguing with each other. It is nice to have those options as a consumer myself, and I do think that there is so much variance between quality, between dispensaries or retail outlets, that we can support having multiple competition across the street from each other.
May I just ask you, as an activist, are there cities where you think concentration has been proven to be successful?
I don't know if we've had a chance to see that as much yet, but in Colorado, I would say they probably, that might be a good one to look at, since I know that there are so few licenses in Washington, it's kind of hard to look at them and learn from them. So it's possible that we may have to take the lead in order to see what happens.
Thank you. Welcome.
What be with the Babylon I deal with? My name's William Holtz, and I'd like to thank you guys for letting me speak, Mayor, City Commissioners. I am a member of Narcotics Anonymous. I'm also a recovering crystal meth addict, and cannabis has been instrumental in me being able to get off of that and no longer be a menace to the community. I also represent Strictly Solutions Clean and Sober Motorcycle Club, and I'm no longer a member of the Gypsy Jokers. So I do have an insight of a little bit as to how organized crime does affect local businesses, as well as returning from after they had the little thing they called the occupation out in the street over there, which I believe did kind of turn into a riot. So this is my first time coming into City Hall on the inside to speak rather than on the outside out there. I think that I was very blessed in my neighborhood. I live at 2114 Northeast Everett Street, and I was very, very fortunate to be able to walk over to a dispensary and state my position and let them know that cannabis was also something that I wanted to stop using in order to be functional in my recovery. They're instrumental in allowing me to come in there in a very, very out of it disposition, very improper member of society, which I do consider myself to be getting closer to today. And there's nothing recreational to me about marijuana or cannabis, whatever you want to call it. You have to be able to interpret the law. I understand the political science, the Articles of Confederation of Faction. I it's the Wild West out here a little bit. I understand due to federal law, marijuana is illegal. Growing marijuana, consuming marijuana, distributing marijuana, it's all illegal. Some of us have given more of our personal interests away. The sheriff and local law enforcement that do protect the business owners that are trying to function under the guidelines of state law, they have to be able to represent each other properly in order to create safety. I've tried growing marijuana at home in my father's house. We did an experiment with one plant. We tried moving it in view and out of view. And it does everything from being an attractive nuisance to teenagers coming in order to try to steal the plants to other things. I think it would be best to model after the existing dispensaries that are in place that have a relationship with the sheriff and how they're already operating. The recreational part I don't know much about, but the medical part I believe should stay in place. They have their own private security and a relationship that does work. And it's closer and it works better with problematic patients such as myself that they can move on and get to where they need to be. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Next are Jeff Sugarman, Mike McGrath, and Bo Whitney. And the last person who signed up is Sam Chapman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Mayor Hells, members of the City Council, my name is Jeff Sugarman. I submitted written testimony, and I'm here today on behalf of one of my clients, Groundworks Industries. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what I said today. I, too, am very concerned about the 1,000-foot rule. I think we've always known that one of the most challenging issues we would face following the passage of Measure 91 is the intersection of the recreational market and the medical marijuana market. I think all of us want to make sure that medical patients can continue to get their medicine untaxed. And I agree with Mr. Morris's comments before that. I think the legislature is soon to act on that issue. I do want to point out that in Colorado, medical facilities were given the right to opt into the recreational system first, and it seemed to work very well there. I think most of the cities in Colorado really appreciated the opportunity for those medical facilities to make their choice first and then allow other recreational facilities in to fill in the blank, so to speak. In Oregon, the legislature has adopted some regulations around time, place, and manner. OLCC is going to give a lot more, but unlike the citing of liquor stores and places that offer video lottery, the legislature has given the city the opportunity to make some policy choices on its own. My fear is that if the way the current law is, or the current ordinance is written, is that you will virtually double the number of outlets in Portland if you adopt the 1,000-foot from each other, but not from each other, from like facilities, but not from all other facilities. I have proposed some language that I think will help. I think it's similar to what Ms. Margolis proposed, and I think it makes sense in those areas where there's concern about oversaturation. We think that these shops will continue to operate safely. They've done a great job since the passage of House Bill 3460 under the licensing and regulations that they faced, but we do understand that there are concerns within the city about doubling the number of stores. So this change, which says no marijuana regulatory license shall be issued to a facility that is within 1,000 feet of an OHA medical marijuana dispensary licensee or another OLCC marijuana retail licensee, would accomplish the problem that we're dealing with here. And with that, I think that in summary, we believe that this would lead to a much more orderly process, a thoughtful, a fair, and a workable process for city licensure of both medical and recreational facilities. Thank you very much.
What's your thought of the alternative suggestion of merely allowing the medical to apply a day or two earlier?
I think that's a workable solution, too. I think the idea is that we want to give those folks a chance, those folks who have been participating, who've gone through the state process, who've set up their security systems, who've invested in businesses and employees and leases, give them the opportunity to move into this new market and still leave room for others to come in. So I would be okay with that option as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
My name is Bo Whitney. I'm representing
Greenpoint, Oregon, an Oregon-based corporation, and Left Coast Connection, a Portland-based medical dispensary. I've submitted written testimony, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of items that's included in that testimony. We're in favor of many of the principles associated with public safety and non-proliferation to individuals under the age of 21. However, there's a few aspects of the findings and the proposed ordinances that we're not necessarily in favor of. In section 1 of the published materials for this meeting, it said that there's a claim that saturation increases the likelihood that those under the age of 21 will have access. And we're very, we appreciate that concern. However, there is a substantial body of research that has demonstrated that usage of marijuana by those under the age of 21 actually decreases in states and communities where medical marijuana dispensaries are legal. So just wanted to point that out as, for educational purposes. Comments on chapter 14B, dot 130. An overall comment is, I'm not sure why marijuana testing facilities are not included in this ordinance. And on section 14 or 14B, section 8, subsection 2, restricting the hours of operation. Essentially, the goals of that you stated in your materials is to protect and preserve public health, safety, and general welfare. But this is a retail outlet. There's no direct evidence that would support the policy that restricting hours are necessary to support your goals. Otherwise, there would be there would be a restriction on cigarettes that are sold because there's a pretty well-documented body of evidence that supports cigarettes are a public health and safety issue. And then in terms of the fees, there are some concerns that the fees are substantial enough that it would impact small businesses and minority businesses and that don't necessarily have access to this level of money. So, in general, the overall goal we support. There's some aspects that could be looked into to be touched up a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Mike McGrath. I own a small company called Bridgetown Distribution. I'm a wholesaler that works within the medical marijuana program. I, generally speaking, here to support the idea of the 2-day waiting period or the opportunity for medical dispensaries to put in their application first. Opportunity I would hope to have the same opportunity for already operating in the medical marijuana. Just furthermore, thinking of what could happen if that's not addressed, it would not be good for the city of Portland. It would create a circus, I think, and we would want to avoid that at all costs. Myself, I'm not originally from here, and the opportunities that I've gained out here in Portland are unmatched in any other area of the country that I've lived and I've been around. I was a pedicab driver. It was fun, but it was just another opportunity that I was allowed. And here, there's so many small businesses and entrepreneurs that have the ability to, make it. And how it's written can definitely confound that. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more signed up, and then if there's anyone else that wants to speak who didn't sign up, this would be the time. So come on up.
Last are Sam Chapman, and we have Rainy Day Woman 12 and Rainy Day Woman 35.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Mayor Hales, Commissioners, my name is Sam Chapman for the record. I run New Economy Consulting, which is a firm based here in Portland that works with municipalities across the state in crafting regulations around the marijuana industry, as well as we have clients that also need to navigate those regulations. So again, I don't want to take too much time. I'd like to echo the thoughts of many other people behind me regarding the 1,000-foot buffer issue that we've been dealing with here. I do think that it would automatically double the amount of dispensaries that we would have in the city. I've been to a couple of the work groups, which, by the way, I'd like to thank Victor and Teresa both for hosting those. They were very informative, and they were very responsive to concerns of both community members and marijuana industry members alike. So thank you. And I think when I initially had asked about why we were not including 1,000-foot buffers between medical and recreational, the response I got was, we don't have the authority. And so I looked into that. I went and met with Legislative Council last week in Salem to check and see whether or not the city of Portland may have the authority to do that. And maybe the confusion was you have the time, place, and manner authority in two different places, one for medical and one for recreational, but they're not necessarily in the same place, right, in different bills. And so I think maybe the confusion there was, well, if we don't explicitly have authority to write a regulation that deals with both medical and recreational, then we're not sure if we want to go down that route. And so I wanted to share with you, when I met with Legislative Council, they said you absolutely do have the authority. And if we could avoid having them write an opinion on it, they would like us to do that. The second part, well, I guess the second part to that same issue was, I noticed that it was stated in the presentation that the city didn't want to be preferential to existing facilities. And I was curious as to why that was, outside of maybe business reasons, if there's a specific reason why you didn't want to be preferential to existing facilities.
That was reflecting the feedback we heard from the community at the town halls. It
Okay.
wasn't a city position.
Very good, okay.
Let me turn that around if I could, because it seems to me it raises a legal question of just us declaring that one group of licensees is privileged over another. So
Right.
you're the lawyer, so.
Not an attorney.
Excuse me.
Not an attorney.
That is a compliment. But,
Thank you.
You're the advocate.
Thank you.
And we'll have to ask our esteemed counsel, but, I mean, what are the analogies, examples of where we just declare that, you know, one class of licensees gets privilege over another, just because we say so?
Sure, no, and that's a great question. And again, not an attorney, so I can't give legal advice on that. But I do think that, you know, one of those classes of licensees exists and one does not right now. And I think that's a major distinction. No one holds any recreational licenses. They just don't exist. And so we're talking about existing businesses that, again, has been previously stated, these are good actors. They've been licensed, right? I mean, these are people that have constituents, that have patients. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned tonight that I would very much like to put before you to consider is that, as it's been said, many of these medical dispensaries are going to want to transition to recreational, right? They're going to bring their patients with them. A lot of their patients are not going to pay $400 to renew their card. That's tax money for the city of Portland if you were to implement your 3% tax or whichever route you go. And so that is one additional reason as to why you may want to consider giving preferential treatment to medical dispensaries. And if even not to think of it as preferential treatment, but rather avoiding additional saturation, which I really hear is the larger goal here. And I think you can very easily accomplish that through the suggestions that have been stated here tonight in making sure that any marijuana retailer, whether medical or recreational, is not allowed to exist within 1,000 feet of each other. Two other quick notes. One on on-site consumption. I just want to clarify that having helped write House Bill 3460 and that law that legalized medical marijuana dispensaries, patients are allowed to consume on premise in the locked, closed room if they are an employee, not just any patient. And that was just one clarification that I wanted to add to the record. And the last thing I wanted to speak on was lounges, and I wanted to share with you an article, and I'd be happy to actually submit it in testimony. I haven't done so, from the Register Guard in Eugene that was published probably about a year ago. I'm a University of Oregon alumni, and I'm very aware of a park that is just adjacent to the college, where all the freshmen, for whatever reason, go to smoke marijuana. And they don't know that there's security lined around the border, right? Like these guys have no idea they're walking into a bear trap, and sometimes it's
There's
a little
parents
comical.
at home whose freshmen just went off to the U of O who are cringing right now.
Right, exactly. No, but here's the thing, right?
They're
So-
on the phone, but
No. And they're going to love this because this is a proposal that they had put forth in the Register Guard, which was basically, it was a mother who was very upset about, my children I don't feel safe sending my children to play in this park because there's a bunch of freshmen getting stoned out of their minds, and I don't feel like that's a safe environment. And so, basically, the next logical step from that was we need a place where they can go, where they're not going to adversely affect the communities, to where they can legally do what they're now allowed to do in a private, safe environment that's not in public. And so the more that we are able to continue to have the conversations about lounges and public safety, I think we're going to be able to address neighborhood concerns simultaneously.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Scott Grenfell. I have a dispensary in Southeast Portland. I'm also a member of the Oregon Cannabis Business Council. I just would like the opportunity to keep growing our business, I guess, and not be, we've been there for 4 years. We went through the thing last year with 3460. We have a lot of money invested. We have employees. And I just want to make sure that we are able to keep doing what we want to do and not be phased out, like Mr. Morris was saying. And so just to consider all opportunities to allow the existing dispensaries to stay in business in the next few years and keep our employees employed and keep stay in Portland and do what we're doing and keep working. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Shaheen, and I'm a licensed math teacher here in Oregon. I'm also a dispensary owner and part of the Oregon Cannabis Business Council, and I just would like to reiterate a lot of what was said today. I think Amy Margolis' suggestion is a great idea. I also think Don Morris' suggestion is also a great idea. Oversaturation is an issue. You could take a look at Sandy. It's called the Green Mile. You've got a dispensary at 24th and Sandy, 28th and Sandy, 32nd and Sandy, 36th and Sandy. It goes right down the line. So every 4 blocks, there's a dispensary. And if you don't do the 1,000 feet from any marijuana facility, then you're going to have a dispensary at every 2 blocks down that street. And again, going back to dispensaries that have already been established for years, we are 1 year in operation. I'm not as long as Dawn and Scott with their dispensaries, but I gave up my job and my life savings to do this business. I think that I serve the community well. I've been to the Kearns Neighborhood Association. I volunteered. My staff has volunteered for the association. So I think that we do our part to pave the way for this industry, and I think it's important for us to continue to do so. I also think that given that Colorado had an advanced start for current medical dispensaries, it's not far-fetched to follow a state that has done well with what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to speak? So I know we want to bring our staff back up because I think several of us have questions and follow-up concerns. So maybe let me put this back in play here about the 1,000-foot perimeter. So make sure I understand. I'm not sure if I was fully grounded in the state law and rules, and that is under the current law about medical dispensaries and under what we think will be law and rule about recreational facilities, people will not be able to obtain a state license for both on the same site. Is that right?
That is correct. There's no plan to co-locate. The legislative intent was pretty clear in terms of keeping both systems completely separate and siloed. That's why medical dispensaries are regulated by the Oregon Health Authority, and the recreational system will be regulated by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission.
We heard from people today that we're hoping that they might be able to operate a combined facility, but that sounds like that hope is not likely to be supported by the state, right?
No.
But in the instance that Ms. Reinhardt mentioned, where there's 2 separate entrances, a wall between,
Two separate supply lines, 2 separate business entities that are basically just divided by a wall, yes, that could potentially be allowed.
One of the limitations is with OLCC, there will be a seat-to-sale tracking system, and that does not exist with the Oregon Health Authority system.
And so what do you think of this idea that Ms. Margulis proposed and actually that Mr. Sugarman also proposed in slightly different form of of having the city pay attention to all dispensaries with the 1,000-foot buffer rather than, segregating them into
Right.
these two types?
So there are a number of concerns that we have. We did evaluate this idea early on, and first of all, House Bill 3400 gives local governments explicit authority to establish a 1,000-foot buffer between recreational licenses. It does not speak at all to any kind of crossover. Further, the OLCC has stated publicly that as far as they're concerned in their rulemaking process right now, which is not complete, they do not acknowledge the existence of any medical dispensaries. So even if we were to submit a Lux statement that said, no, the city does not approve this license because of an existing medical dispensary within 1,000 feet, the likelihood that the state would be able to follow that is very small. We would be on really tenuous legal footing, at least that was the advice of our city attorneys through this process. So that was partially the issue. The other part was that there are, because the state has established them within these two very specific systems, the idea that the medical dispensaries would somehow just sort of flip over into recreational is sort of a misnomer. They're going to have to go through the same licensing requirements that are still being developed by the OLCC as any other new business. And part of the public involvement process, or part of the feedback that we received, was about removing those barriers from individuals who are looking to get into the recreational business. And so, I mean, this is a completely different field that essentially people are
Back up
moving
again
in.
and just form my understanding, and this may be a little PTSD on my part about Lottery Row, but if you told me that we have one state agency that's refusing to acknowledge the existence of another, that makes me angry. So I'll try to calm down. But just because one state agency is refusing to acknowledge the existence of another doesn't mean we shouldn't. So help me out on that, because that does sound like Lottery Row to me, where we have the OLCC and the Lottery Commission both gleefully issuing licenses with no regard for proximity and effect. And here we were, and here we are still in that spot with that problem. That's what this council's trying to avoid in dealing with this issue. So walk us through that and walk us through these options, because we all don't want to go there.
Right. So I think that the primary concern related to saturation is one that has what drove our advocacy in the state legislature around this issue. The idea that we might end up with another Lottery Row because of the OHA and OLCC's communication probably is not the case. I mean, the worst case scenario that we have here is potentially a medical dispensary or a retail establishment, which are serving two different client bases within 1,000 feet. Our concern is that we may lose that partnership that we have with the state with the land use compatibility statement, which is unique within the marijuana laws. When Measure 91 was passed, it still had the language related to saturation and not within the public necessity or convenience that is housed in the Liquor Act, and has been very problematic for us and has not been able to be interpreted by the state because they can't establish what a definition for saturation is for an urban environment, for a rural environment, for a coastal environment. So, and they haven't tried. So it was very mindfully removed from Measure 91 within House Bill 3400 and replaced with the opportunity for the city to place this buffer between recreational establishments. If we then go to the state through this established partnership, and say that we can't approve a Lux statement because they're within 1,000 foot of a medical dispensary that is not recognized by the state per the intent of the legislature, then we stand to lose that partnership and that ability to maintain even that 1,000-foot buffer.
But can I follow up on
Yeah,
Charlie's point?
please.
Because I'm a little confused about this, and it seems to me there's three potential options, and I don't know legally where this falls. There's the option that the legislation affirmatively says we can do something. That's the easiest. But that doesn't quite apply here. there's the option of the legislation specifically prohibiting us from doing something, which this council is very familiar with.
Yeah,
The
been there.
legislature is never shy about being very prescriptive on that front, we're preempted, or thou shalt not. Then there's something in the middle, and that's the exercise of our police power, where we have broad latitude. And I just don't understand, as I listen to this discussion, I'm not quite clear where it falls. I think your analysis is very thoughtful. I mean, I get that you're showing us there are all these connected pieces, and our lawyers are encouraged to be conservative in their advice. But I think we're in this gray where the law doesn't maybe affirmatively say we can extend to this point, doesn't say we can't, and then we're used to interpreting our police power pretty broadly to suit what we believe is the public purpose. So for me, it's first and foremost a policy question
Absolutely.
of what do we think is the right buffer and for what reason, and then it's a legal analysis to see if we can sustain it. I'm going to start with the policy because I frankly am currently more persuaded by the Sugarman argument about a 1,000 foot, regardless of who
Type,
licenses the entity. I also think administratively, in some ways, it might be easier for us to enforce that.
Might be.
And I think the public probably does have a concern validly about concentration, generally. But legally, we're not sure whether we're on sound footing, so that's why we're looking at our attorney.
Well, she may look back for a while, but I want to echo your comments, Commissioner Fish. Again, having had this experience with the state on liquor and lottery regulation and other issues as well, sort of restating your point and getting a little clearer in my own mind here, our job is to try to make this city livable. We should start with policy, and start with policy that we think that makes sense, and that either is explicitly allowed under state law, or that we think is allowed under our own home rule charter if state law doesn't explicitly prohibit it. That's why we have a home rule charter, and as you know, I'm a little bit of a table pounder on that subject. So, my favorite provision in our charter is the one that I have taped on the back of the little emblem on my desk that says the mayor shall exercise a careful supervision over the general affairs of the city. That seems like a fairly broad grant of authority. Now, it's not absolute. So we need to figure this out on our terms, and I too am interested in talking further about this perimeter issue, because we all have at least in mind a result that we want. And I think the result that we want is not doing injury to the folks that already are licensed as medical dispensaries. Those that are operating legally and properly ought to have a reasonable shot at the business, whatever the business may be. Sounds like the state's going to make them choose. You're standing on two logs, you're going to have to get on one, because the state's not going to let you be both a OHA licensee and a OLCC licensee. So you're going to have to pick which business you want to be in, because those are the terms the state has dictated to you. We can't change that. But what we can say is, based on our experience overall with liquor and other regulated industries, what do we think is reasonable in terms of a separation? And like you, Nick, I'm leaning more towards this idea of a general 1,000-foot buffer rather than pretending that the other type of licensee doesn't exist and hoping for the best.
So let me just ask the question a different way. Looking at the chart where obviously the state and the city are in collaboration and both have a part in licensing these facilities, if the council were to decide that we want to have 1,000 feet between any kind of marijuana retail or dispensary, is that something that you and ONI could make that work?
Yes, we could, definitely from a policy standpoint. My concern, again, rests with the collaboration between us and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission and OHA as well. If we're going to tell OHA, for instance, if all of the medical dispensaries switch over to retail and therefore open up the landscape for additional medical dispensaries, which could happen, if medical dispensaries were to come in and try to cite, again, it's that communication piece with the Oregon Health Authority and the OLCC and whether or not they're going to recognize each other, because we will then be in a circumstance where the city of Portland will say no, and one of those state agencies will say yes. and we'll need to then address that. So I think we could make it work. We're just concerned about what the potential is for being in some pretty significant conflict with both state agencies about what's a licensed location and what's not.
Yeah, but again, I'd rather us try to get it right from the beginning rather than try to.
And I share that.
Back our way into right later.
Okay.
So let me ask you also about the alternative suggestion of allowing the current facilities to get a foot in the door a day or two or a week or two earlier. What's your opinion about that?
Again, I think the argument that a medical dispensary is the same as a retail outlet, just it's false. There is no retail recreational locations right now, so there's none that are in good standing or in good compliance.
No, I think the request was to allow the current medicals to apply for a retail.
Right. Based
And
on
basically switch.
Right, based on the idea that the ones that are currently a medical dispensary under OHA are in good compliance and in good standing and have been following all of the existing rules. But the truth is that those rules don't exist and nobody's been following those rules at this point. So it's almost the same sort of argument that a bar would come into us and say, we've been selling a regulated substance for X amount of years in good standing, and we want, a day or two ahead of time in order to be able to get into this business as
This
well.
hearing's had some of the best metaphors in a long time, because it's easier to follow when you put it that way, but.
So it's your advice that if we want to do something in response to the testimony that we heard, that would be better to go with the 1,000 foot between them all rather than the foot in the door earlier.
From an equity lens, I think that's the more appropriate way to go.
Following up on that point, because we've asked you to do a very important job, and part of that is to manage a set of complicated relationships, and those relationships have been strained, at least with one of those agencies, from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it your view that that you would benefit?
Carla's just gotten some directions. She's not going anywhere.
Do you think that with the adequate amount of time, you can take a run at working out those relationship issues?
I think that the relationship with the entity that you are referring to has definitely improved, and it has been
under Rob Patridge.
Yes, absolutely, and especially with as marijuana has rolled through, they were integral in getting these set of, especially the land use compatibility statement in particular.
Rob Patridge is a very responsible guy. He's also held elected office. I mean, the proposal that we're kicking around here, we're struggling with, is not a pretext for doing something else. It's not a Trojan horse. We're not debating this because we want to use this to harm some economic enterprise or to express our values around something. We're debating this in the context of all reasonable time, place, manner, police power discussions. And my guess is that Rob Patridge, of all people, would understand the context of that discussion. Now, he may want uniformity in the different jurisdictions. It may present headaches for him to have different jurisdictions have completely different sets of rules, but that's why he gets the big bucks. I mean, he can work that out. We are sovereign, as the mayor has pointed out. Although I do think the mayor's interpretation of the charter is a bit extreme.
It's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I think it's,
Anyway, there may be other questions, but let me try to capture at least what I think may be a sense of the council at this point. I think a number of us are interested in amending this to have 1,000 foot perimeter regardless of type.
We will make that work then.
So we might be interested in having that language. You've had some suggestions for that language today. That suggestion may be right word for word. It also might need some effort by staff. I'm working my way around to an obvious point, which is we don't have to adopt this today, even though it has an emergency clause on it, right? So there's time enough, again, measure twice, cut once, time enough to take the discussion that we've had here at the meeting today and some excellent testimony and develop some amendments beyond the ones that Commissioner Fritz has already brought forward. I'd like you to do that unless, Amanda, you think there's some reason for haste here. I don't think you do.
No, I would propose that we bring back a completely amended version next Wednesday and hopefully have a very short hearing on it.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing.
Before you do, Mayor.
On the matter overall, but ask you to bring back that amendment for council consideration.
So before you do that, though, to the sponsor, and I don't remember a hearing where more people have gotten up and said such laudatory things about a process. It might have something to do with Commissioner Fritz being in charge of owning.
Of course it does.
And Dan and I have been put on notice that we have to have the two new slides in the PowerPoint that actually lay out community consultation. So it'll be in our future PowerPoint. But a superb hearing and a superb discussion with the professionals as well. I just have a question. There were some other issues that came up in this hearing, and I just want to make sure from Commissioner Fritz's point of view that some of these other issues like lounges, consumption on site, the young woman who said that she closes her door to be able to consume lawfully, are there any of those issues that we need to take up as part of this package, or
No.
can they be deferred?
We can't take them up as part of this package. There's all kinds of additional discussions that need to have. I appreciate your lauding of the process. I'm very proud of my ONI staff and actually for everybody who's participated in this whole
Absolutely.
discussion. It's been tremendous, and I heard the same kinds of thoughtful discussion at the community meeting. I will say at the community meeting, we did have neighbors coming in with concerns, so which we didn't get today. But as far as the lounges, and that gets into the whole issues that we banned indoor smoking in the state some time ago, employees, safety, ventilation, and those kinds of things. So it's certainly a longer discussion that we
Okay,
will
so
take up.
to those who came and put it on the table, I mean, we're deferring on a number of those issues that people raised, just as you advised us that we'll, at some later date, be taking up the taxation issue.
Correct. And we listed those in the presentation. I do have one more question.
Testing facilities was another one, right?
Yes, I wanted to ask, why are we not regulating testing facilities?
That is beyond the scope of our authority under House Bill 3400.
Thank you. That's a
Okay.
quick answer to that
Good.
one.
That's easy
That
to
was easy.
dispose of then. Okay, other questions or requests for staff?
Is that the only change that anybody on council
Sounds like
wants?
it, right? The perimeter issue is the one area we want to revise further, is that right? So then that sounds like an opportunity to continue this item for a week, give you the chance to prepare with the city attorney's help a further amendment that captures this issue.
Absolutely.
And although I consider the basic hearing closed here, I do want to certainly leave the record open and let people have a chance to make sure they think we got it right when it comes to the language of that provision, because that's the heart of the matter that we've heard from the community on here today. So don't need to re-argue the whole issue, and I don't think there are a lot of people here that necessarily want to do that, but I would like to hear feedback from people as to, did we get that issue right or not?
Well,
And since it won't be a time certain next week, we will, of course, it'll be out on the council agenda when it's published on Friday what the amendments are. And we will take testimony next week only on the amendment. If you're fine with the amendment, you don't have to come and say that you're fine with the amendment. If there's a problem and you'd like different wording, that's what we would need to hear
So
from you
I'll
about.
open the hearing in order for people to let us know if they think that we haven't gotten it right, if the amendment needs further work. But if you say, yes, you captured the sense of this discussion, thank you, council, then you don't have to do that in person.
Yeah, and this is actually kind of a rare moment, Mayor, because we actually have a complete record on the question of the amendment,
Right.
even though we're going to be putting an amendment forward. So we could technically craft an amendment now as a placeholder, but I think it's better practice to do the wordsmithing over the next week.
Good. Well, I want to thank you, Commissioner Fritz, and the ONI staff, and also some citizen volunteers who've worked hard on this. Thank you very much, and excellent testimony from the community today. I think I learned a lot. I think we all did, and we're working our way into a new aspect of life in Portland that we're trying to get right. So we appreciate your help in that effort to try to get it right.
Thank you so much for the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
you.
this item's continued till next week, and we are adjourned.